Welcome to this special Profiles in Excellence show coming to you from the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss IT success stories at numerous government agencies and hear from the key leaders making them happen. We will be doing the show in 3 segments with 3 different groups of federal executives. With me on the first segment are Turk, the Acting Chief Information Officer, Department of Commerce; Marie Roat, the Chief Information Officer at SBA; Renee, Wynn, the Chief Information Officer at NASA; and Joe Klimavicz, the Chief Information Officer, Department of Justice. Let's start with Turk at the end of the table. The show's all about highlighting success stories and talking about things that are going really well. Talk to us a little bit about the Department of Commerce and a program that you're making success with.
Sure. Earlier in the year, in the fiscal year, actually fiscal year 17, we took a look at our organization and took a look at where we're headed within the department. And it became very, very clear that we needed to consolidate services, we needed to collapse services, we needed to bring to unity certain services, what we called strategic sourcing or strategic initiatives. The idea was to bring to unity these services so that we could do them better and offer a quality service at a lower price, right? And so when we put this in place, we saw that there were several different aspects of this that we needed to do to be successful. One of which was the realignment of our organization. We found that there were certain strategic skills that we needed to enhance and to bring forward within the organization so that we could then make sure that we were successful. And so we did the realignment. We added a risk component. We also knew that we were going to have to do significant outsourcing and that we were going to have to collapse to Unity services and do BPAs. So that drove changes in the way we did business in contracting and in program management. And so we've been emphasizing with our personnel contracting and program management for their careers to be able to move forward in what we needed to do.
Yeah, now, certainly not same old anymore. No. With mobility and cloud and DevOps and everything else. It would seem that you have to evolve with the technology.
Exactly, and to that point, and also in conjunction with the new administration, we have several strategic services that we offer now that capitalize on that new organizational realignment. We have established an Enterprise Security Operations Center in Fairmont, West Virginia, which is where we do the bulk of our incident response and incident reporting, as well as basically bake the cake for our components in terms of cybersecurity initiatives and being able to bring forward information about the systems to our components. In addition to that, NOAA has developed a trusted internet connection access point and have gained the approval to be able to offer that to the rest of the components within the Department of Commerce. The beauty of that is that it will save money for our telecommunications and connection to the internet. We think between 40 and 60%.
Wow.
As we mature this. In addition, that TICAP is resident at Fairmont, West Virginia, right on top of our Enterprise Security Operations Center.
Very cool.
So then we can use that information coming out of the TICAP for our own cybersecurity processes and procedures. And lastly, I think one of the bigger successes we've had is our CDM program. The CDM program, in conjunction with DHS, was really the first strategic sourcing / strategic services initiative, which I would maintain broke the ice for the rest of the Department of Commerce, bringing all of the various components within the department together in a concerted, strategic kind of offering that it was the first of its kind for Commerce.
Very good.
So Commerce is a very diverse.
Now, if I asked you, pick a lesson learned through this process that you'd pass on to your colleagues, maybe to give them some advice as to something you encountered that might help them as they work their way through some of these same issues.
Well, it's kind of interesting because in order to have a strategic service or a shared service, you have to have a service to share. I mean, it's kind of trite, but
intuitively that sounds right to me.
Yeah, but it's really important because otherwise, if you don't have the service in place initially, you then have to develop a project to do that service, which at some point may become a shared service or a strategic service. So we've actually done it iteratively, developed the ROI, and moved forward with the projects as we have developed them. And in the Department of Commerce, we've been very successful in showing that these things can work. Excellent. And that they're successful.
Excellent.
So.
Thanks, Rod. Maria Roat, man, I have all kinds of great things about you. Every year, constantly moving along. I've been following your career since DHS, DOT, now CIO over at SBA. Everyone's proud of you. But tell us about a program that you're proud of yourself.
Yeah, over the last year at SBA has been a huge transformational year around technology. SBA, we jokingly call it the lost decade around technology, and really moving the department forward fast and hard and continuing to move the ball forward. You know, a year ago I said I set the direction, 4 racks, moving to Windows 10 2016, as well as upgrading the infrastructure. Easier said than done. When you say we're getting to 4 racks in the primary data center, when you have a data center that's got water coming in it and lots of racks and lots of old equipment, it's a huge lift. And we've moved to the cloud, and we're not lifting and shifting. We have laid out the Tiger teams. We have done the architecture. We've done the migration planning. We're doing all the operational things that I've learned over the last 4 years and watching other people what not to do. So we're moving to the cloud. We're moving very fast. We're upgrading our infrastructure. You can't move to the cloud. You can't put things in place unless you've got the infrastructure that can support everything you do. 1/3 of our infrastructure was saturated. So not only was it a failing data center, water, racks, all kinds of problems, it was an infrastructure that was more than 30% of it was overloaded, like peaking at 100%. Wow. We are moving from our T1s, T3s, multiple T1s, all of that to a fiber backbone across the board. We're about 40, almost 50% done right now.
Wow, excellent.
We're rolling out on Windows 10, 2016, but all of this is hard. We've put CDM in the cloud. To do this requires saying, a year ago I said, no new hardware. I will not sign anything for any new hardware in our primary data center, period. Rod talked about CDM. We're the first federal agency to put CDM in the cloud because I refused to spend all that money on hardware. I said, why not?
Right.
My folks went, I said, go talk to DHS and Mark Nightinger and the team over there. We did it. Right. We said, let's go do it, but we need 96 cores. I said, no, you don't. Start small, build up. So this year has been a huge transformation, but the work we did in 12 months through the summer of this year set the stage for us to be able to support the hurricane activities. We partner with FEMA. We do all those loans for businesses as well as people for the home loans. It set the stage for us to be very quickly support the hurricane and the disasters when they hit this year.
Yeah, see, a lot of people don't realize some of the scope of the mission of someone like an SBA. They think small business, they don't realize the scope of the things that you do actually get involved with and have to do. And what's wonderful hearing you talk here is, you've set some high goals and you're holding people to meeting those goals and you're measuring progress to get there. And I think that's a real credit to you.
We've really just continuing to push.
And what's the lesson learned? The same question I asked Rod. If you had to pass a lesson on to your colleagues and so forth, what comes to mind that you would say, as you do this, think about this? Transformation
is not easy. It's hard. Having the technical chops and saying, this is what we're doing, and having the direction, and here's where we're going, and continuing to push. There are days where it's been, pushing that rope up a hill with my nose. There's been really, really hard days. But setting the direction, here's where we're going. We have to. Again, I said earlier about the lost decade, continuing to push every day, here's where we're going, and getting everybody on the bus. I can't say that I have everybody on the bus right now on my team, but I've brought in some really sharp people, and some of them we're pulling them along, but we're continuing to push, and I think you have to do that. As part of your lessons learned, just keep going. There's going to be failures, just keep going.
Maria, we've done this is show 160, and I think talking about getting everybody on the team and the culture issues and getting everybody working in one direction has been a challenge 160 times on 160 shows. So I think we understand that the challenges you face in that space. But thanks so much for sharing all that with you. Renee, Wynn, NASA always has neat stuff going on, man. You probably could, in fact, I was watching that supermoon the other day from a NASA camera, and that was really neat. But you probably got thousands of neat things to talk about. Pick one.
Sure. So we did the eclipse this year, and we decommissioned IT by jamming it into a planet.
Wow.
So one way we look at decommissioning is a little different than most. No, I am going to pull on that thread, which is changing a culture. So when I got to NASA in 2015, they had already had the wisdom to ask themselves some really tough questions with regard to the way they manage IT. And we have to remember that NASA will invent the IT that it needs for the specific purpose, which includes being part of the team that brought us the internet. And we still have that, we wear that well because we can invent. But IT is a strategic resource now, and much more now than it was, and the threats against the agency are much greater. In every agency and every human faces that different threat, and it's rising every day. But in the wisdom, they said IT needs to be a strategic resource, and that was done through what's called a business services assessment. And then I came in innocently, and they said, okay, make it happen. Well, you can move boxes and all of that, but you really need to capture the hearts and minds of those that serve you, that are in your organization, and those that are perhaps a little more resistant to what you want to get done. And so I've been working for a couple of years on the business services assessment, which is restructuring the delivery of IT, many more enterprise services, but also making the tough calls of what should be locally done and that which is still going to very much be done by the missions as long as I've got insights into that. So it's jammed my calendar. I get to be part of decisions of planetary protection. What do you think's going to be first when we return from Mars with humans? How do you prepare for that? What IT is there? What's your cybersecurity plan? What's your safety plan? And also been part of other conversations about the Mars journey that we've been talking about, whether we pivot back to the moon, where do we go from there? And so that's been really exciting to be accepted that way, but it wasn't easy to get there because IT was seen at NASA as just the delivery of that device. Well, now we're recognizing, in part because of cyber threats, that we need to be at the table to make sure that what we do in the corporate isn't affecting the mission, our flying assets. That's why I'm putting it up here, and I am including airplanes in that one, as well as our ground systems, which is our mission operations control, and our HVAC systems. You know, all of these things speak and interconnect with each other. And so NASA's really grabbed onto this and really embraced it. And we can't keep up with the demands that we are now getting to be parts of teams to both better protect NASA and continue to allow us to share our data across the globe. And in fact, a lot of our data comes from off this planet.
Excellent. You know, I'm right picking up on some themes here as I'm listening to you. I'm hearing themes of consolidating, realigning, modernizing, enterprise approaches. I mean, it's a common theme rolling through the panelists right now. Joe Klimavicz at DOJ. Joe, I'm sure you've got your share of challenges over there, as the other large agencies with strong components have. How about picking a program that comes to mind that you'd like to share with us that you think is working well?
Pick up on the theme of culture change. But first, Jim, thanks for having me again, and glad to be back here. Look, technology is intrinsic to everything that the department does, and when IT goes down, essentially the department goes down, the organization goes down, and my office delivers key IT services to the department. One way we've been working for the last probably 2 years to mitigate that risk is pursuing ISO 20000 certification. And so exactly 1 week ago, my office celebrated becoming one of only 3 government organizations to achieve ISO 20000 certification. Obviously a multi-year effort, but you know, the ISO 20000 is an international standard for IT service management, reflects the ITIL framework, and we really want to make sure that we're following best practices out there in industry, that we're striving for excellence in everything we do, and we can demonstrate the knowledge. We completed an exhaustive audit, and 14 processes were certified: business relationship management, service level management, information security. And when you think about this, I mean, it positions us to provide better services, higher quality services, make sure those services are repeatable and consistent, delivered in a consistent manner to support the mission. Also, we want to make sure we're in a position to continuously improve those services. So we're doing that as well. And I think we get, my office gets audited tremendously. Yeah, I think we all do.
I think
whether it be financial or FEMA or just by everybody. And the more we can standardize, and we can use this certification to better position ourselves in other areas as well, like financial and FEMA. It's also, and a lot of people say, why do you care about getting certification? It's a visible thing. It's something that my office has strived for since I've been there, and we can now hang banners and,
Absolutely.
flags, and
that's important.
It is very important
Optics
to show.
are important.
It is very important, and we were also able to develop a normalized set of metrics that we can use to compare to others out there, not only in government but in the private sector.
I want to ask you lessons learned, but before I do that, I want to back up one. I did not ask you what the lesson learned that you want to pass on, Renee, and
I was worried you thought it's because I can't be taught. But thank you. I think the lesson learned is any time that, and you never know how a change is going to hit someone, right? Even on a personal level, that change part is really hard. And so the day before you start what you're going to do is the time that you need to start thinking about change leadership, because you really have to grab people's hearts and minds with what you want to do, so they'll bring what they know to the table and make what you're doing even better in its next iteration. And if you don't do that, you're going to be facing headwinds the whole entire time, and the celebrations are always sort of a little bit dampened because some people feel like it was done to them and they weren't part of that process.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm so happy that we got the lesson learned, because you sort of talk from the heart in terms of bringing it down to what the reality of what the environment's like. Joe, lesson learned.
I think the lessons learned are very much like you would expect from any change management process, but constant communication. And I actually think of this as almost like you're learning a foreign language, and if you want to start speaking the same standard language, then ask them questions in that and expect answers to come back in that same language. Be mindful of adding another layer of bureaucracy. Nobody wants to see these are essentially more mandates with nothing comes away. In our cases, we were baking these processes into our technology, and we were doing away with other kind of SOPs and other ways of doing business. So we were trying not to add additional work onto anybody's plate. And I think the last thing is to make sure that the processes and the metrics and all that are really relevant to the job that we're trying to perform. We hold weekly and monthly reviews, looking at those metrics, make sure we're actually using them to our advantage, to we're constantly getting better. So.
Excellent, excellent. And I want to thank these panelists, all from the civilian agencies, for being with us for the first segment here today. I know they're all extremely busy. You have very, very busy schedules, and we're just thrilled that you come out here to share your knowledge with us. One of the things I love about doing the show is you keep me smart. You say things and I learn things every show. So I appreciate you all being here. We're going to move on to our second segment here, which will feature DHS. But first, we're going to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik. On our second segment here, we're going to feature the Homeland Security panel. With us, we have Kevin Cox, the CDM Program Manager, Department of Homeland Security; Adrian Gardner, the Chief Information Officer, FEMA; Soraya Correa, the Chief Procurement Officer, Department of Homeland Security Headquarters; and Stephen Rice, Deputy Chief Information Officer, Department of Homeland Security Headquarters. Let's get into talking about exciting stuff going on in DHS. Let's start with Kevin. Kevin, I think of you and I think CDM. I mean, it just jumps right out at me. But tell us about some progress and what's going on exciting in the area.
Sure. Thanks again for having us today. And we're going to talk about our program in terms of where we're currently at and where we're headed. But the purpose of the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program is to help the agencies protect their data against the threat, the nation-state threat, criminal threat that's targeting us on a daily basis. So just to set some context, we're working with those agencies to get solutions out there, to get better visibility on their networks, and to get the proper protections in place. So what we have been able to accomplish over the past few years is to get discovery out to the agencies, get technology out so that they have real-time awareness of what's connected to their network, who the user base is, and then to feed that data up into a near real-time dashboard, to allow the agencies and ultimately the federal government to be able to ensure that the proper protections are in place and that we have a good understanding of how the data is being stored and protected in the long run. So in this past year, in the past few months, we have brought the federal dashboard up online. All of the agencies now have their agency dashboard in place. There's still a lot of work to be done to finish getting the data feeds up from the sensors out at the agencies and making sure that the agencies have complete visibility of their networks, and then ultimately summarizing that data up to the federal level, getting that federal dashboard operationalized with the NCIC, the folks that are able to monitor and help the agencies address their vulnerabilities. And then we're going to continue forward with our shared service effort as well, helping the non-CFO Act agencies protect their environment using cloud services, and then continuing to work with the, as we move into phases 3 and 4 of our program, getting additional protections out on the network for the agencies, as well as getting down to the data even more and protecting that, getting the right solutions in place for the agencies.
Yeah. You know, what's exciting to me about watching this program is, having been the vice chair of the Federal CIO Council for close to 4 years and being part of the Reinventing Government, to do anything on a government-wide basis is a major, major Herculean task. And to see this program continuing to evolve like it has been evolving is a real joy to watch. How about some of the lessons you're learning along the way?
The one big lesson learned I like to come back to is the value of partnerships and really understanding that this is not just a DHS program, it's a program for the federal government. And it's us partnering with the agencies to help protect their data, help protect their networks. It's also us partnering with the system integrator community and the vendor community to help get the right technologies out quickly to the agencies to help them ensure that they have the latest, greatest technologies to protect their environments.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Adrian Gardner over FEMA. Adrian, talk to us a little bit about some programs at FEMA. Obviously, FEMA's been in the spotlight. We had one heck of a year with the hurricane, so I know you guys have been doing a monumental task in terms of pressure and requirements, but what sticks out to you in program that you think is really making a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been an unprecedented year, obviously. I mean, you look at the number of storms, the fires in California, the government as a whole has rallied together to make that response happen. So one is this whole spirit of partnership, sort of riffing off what Kevin just said. The other governmental agencies that within DHS that participated in the way of surge capacity, the other federal agencies, even those outside of the DHS family that came together with us. It was a team sport. And if you look at the way we did that, from a standpoint of surge capacity, we onboarded more than 10,000 people in less than 6 weeks through our personnel mobilization centers, got them to a place where they were ready to hit the ground running to support survivors directly. That has been a monumental sort of activity for the CIO community outside of just the surge capacity folks.
Sure.
Steve worked with us and across the CIO community within DHS to pony up an additional almost 25 people to do manned call centers at headquarters to take incoming calls real time with survivors in a way that we could not have actually done within our organization, within our agency, without sort of that support. So one of the things I think is a big lesson learned for us is really how do we now sort of institutionalize this, although we have the mandates in place and the process at a high level in place. From an IT and infrastructure standpoint, how do we actually now begin to institutionalize that capability and capacity? And then the other thing is across other federal agencies that are represented at the distant end. So in other words, SBA and HUD, as well as FEMA and DHS employees and staff, how do we actually come together to sort of make this a uniform effort as far as how we'll do this again? Because if you look at it right now, it is going to happen again. The thing now is, how do we prepare for that?
Yeah, I know we talk, I've talked a number of times about the way the world's working these days with technology. We're approaching time where decision making it's pretty getting to be time is equal zero. I mean, you have to just do things just so quick. What are some of the challenges that you have when you're trying to manage something that massive, Adrian?
So it's absolutely time. If you look at these events, from a standpoint of CONUS versus OCONUS, in other words, Puerto Rico and VI versus Texas and Florida, very different sort of challenges, right? And so I think we have to recognize the fact that those challenges exist, plan for those in a way that then makes the outcome, I would say, at least more structured and more of a way in which the survivors and as well as the federal entities know how to sort of play that out. In other words, we have plans in place, but I think we're going to learn a lot coming out of these events where we have never faced a situation where an infrastructure has been completely obliterated to the tune of more than 50% of the infrastructure of Puerto Rico and the VI basically has been rendered inoperable. And so that's something that we have not faced before. And so we need to take that key lesson learned in and then figure out how we're going to actually manage that, whether that be pre-staging sort of assets on island or finding ways in which we can build more robust systems and capabilities on island. So there's a whole discussion around survivable and resilient capabilities, survivable communications, survivable power grid. There's a lot of discussions around that. So I think there are going to be a lot of lessons learned from perspective of how we work
what do you think is what worked well, and what was a key that made things work well?
Yeah.
What
Absolutely, partnership is one. What we did from a perspective of on the IT side, we had rolled out the PIV enablement, the personal identifiable verification card. We leveraged those cards across DHS to create interoperability. So when you had folks coming in from other federal agencies, in other words, from an ICE or a CBP, so on and so forth, we leveraged their PIV credentials. We actually, through the personnel mobilization centers, we sent them all to Anniston, where again, there were 10,000 onboarded. We had actually a structured process to really get them through, trained up, get them oriented to sort of FEMA, and then out the door within like about 72 hours. So a lot of those lessons are things that I would highlight. So partnership, I think leveraging the IT in a way that it meets the demand signal. And then the third thing is really a standardization of our processes. So institutionalizing the way that we fight. So train the way we fight the way we train.
Well said, Adrian, as always. Soraya, Correa, one of my favorite people around town. By definition, IT people and procurement people have a little disagreements here and there, push back and forth, and the IT people say, well, the procurement people are always trying to find ways why we can't do things. But what I like about Soraya is she doesn't view anything as a constraint. She takes it as a challenge and tries to figure out a way to make it happen. But Soraya, tell us about something you're proud about that happened over the past year that you'd like to share with the audience here and the listening audience out in Radio Land.
Sure. Well, I would say probably the first thing I'm most proud of is our Procurement Innovation Lab, which is working collaboratively with all of our customers, whether it's Adrian in FEMA or it's Steve Rice to my left here, our acting CIO, or even with Steve Cox when we talk about the CDM program, which National Protection and Programs Directorate is a strong part of. The Procurement Innovation Lab is focusing on how do we improve business processes, how do we come up with more clever, creative, innovative ways, working within the confines of the regulations to speed up the process, to work better with industry, more closely collaborate with industry as well as our federal partners to come up with smart ways to evaluate proposals in real time and make sure that we're getting the products, the services that we need that support the mission, but in a quick manner so we can get these folks back on the front lines doing their job. The PIL has been very successful. We've run probably over 19 projects.
Oh, wow,
in
cool.
fact, yesterday I was at the Senior Procurement Executives Council that's hosted by the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, and I was really proud to hear the VA highlight a project that they worked on that we collaborated with them, where they used one of our processes, where we used the technical demonstrations from industry. Instead of having them write reams of papers, using reams of paper to write proposals, we bring them in and they demonstrate their capabilities. So I would say that that's what I'm most proud of because it's creative risk-taking. Mm-hmm. It's making sure that we're working in partnership with our customers, and it does the most important thing that I want to do in procurement. Properly plan with my customer to deliver what they need, when they need it, how they need it, in furtherance of the mission.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. The second thing that I would highlight is our collaboration with industry, our acquisition innovations in motion, where we're getting out there and holding things like strategic industry conversation, where we're talking to industry before there are solicitations out there, before we're planning a procurement, to really let them know, here are the challenges we face, here are the problems that we're trying to solve, and making sure that industry understands our needs, but more importantly, that we understand how we can work better with industry. We've been very successful with that. What I'm seeing is our community, the procurement community, being more effective at talking to industry.
Right.
We're not perfect. I'm trying to change a cultural thinking, trying to break that barrier, that myth, as we
Right.
like to call it, that we can't talk to industry. But we're doing a much better job. I'm getting very positive comments from industry. And the other thing that I'm really heartened by is that when industry does see a problem, they bring it to my attention or to the attention of the head of contracting, so the problem can actually be solved.
Right.
So really excited about those kinds of changes.
What a
that we're
novel
making.
idea, you know, if we want to understand each other's requirements, let's talk to each other. What a great idea. And what I also like a lot about Soraya is, you know, over the years I've been able to push back, and she pushed back on me, get into a little tit for tat as to what we think, you know, and I still really don't like that LPTA stuff, but we don't need to talk about it now.
That's okay, I'm with you. I don't like it either too much. No, just kidding.
How about lessons learned?
So I would say lessons learned, I think you're gonna hear the same thing, partnership. It's about partnership at all levels in the organization. One of the things that I think we've done very well at the department is the lines of business within management, the CIO, the CFO, the CPO, all the C-suite. We come together to solve problems. We talk to one another, we share our lessons learned, and we learn to help one another out. That level of partnership permeating the organization is going to make us far more effective and efficient. But then it's taking that partnership outside of our agency and working with the other federal agencies that are out there, whether it's GSA, the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, VA, whoever's out there that's got a really smart idea, let's get in a room together and let's see if we can share in those ideas, we can improve upon the ideas, and maybe even collaborate and do a few things together and really surprise everybody by being consistent across our government.
That's exciting stuff. You know, I guess the theme that emerged on that first panel we had was consolidation, realignment, enterprise approaches, and so forth. What's emerging on this one is the partnering idea, the partnership idea. And I guess having a procurement executive on the panel helps that partnership theme kind of come out too. So, you know, thanks for bringing that out.
I always feel like an honorary CIO when I come and I'm around these guys.
These guys would be honored to have you at the table, I'm sure. Let's talk to Steve Rice, the Deputy CIO at DHS. Steve, what comes to mind if I asked you to highlight a program that you're proud of that happened over the past year?
I don't know if I would highlight a program. I would
Okay.
highlight
I'll go anywhere you want with this.
the change in the conversation at DHS, particularly in the area of IT. One of the things that I witnessed when I first came on last year at the department level was how was IT seen across management, and how we could look at it as a transformational agent. So one of the things that we first and foremost did was making sure that everybody understood our business, understood the challenge, and understood the transparency of the finances, the acquisition, and the issues that we're trying to face. Sounds kind of simple, but if you've never seen a data center, you really don't know the size, scale, and complexity. So first thing we did is I created a roadshow. I took the finance community, I took the procurement community, I put them in the car, I took them in the vans, and drove them down to the data center. I let them see rows and rows of racks of equipment.
Wow.
And they started talking about the challenges of recapitalization and the complexity based on the size, scale, number of patches necessary, and just the pace of a data center. Also had the opportunity to drive down the road and show them a cloud center. I had the opportunity to show them Microsoft. And they saw rows and rows of equipment, but we started talking about a change in business. So instead of it being a cloud and a nebulous term, they started seeing that there are data centers behind it, but it's actually a change in business models. Took back and we started talking about questions at the senior staff level about who are we? So if you start looking at our mission, you know, we support a very broad and diverse mission across the department. And I was able to take the leadership team of DHS, the CIO community, I took them out to the laboratories at TSA. And I was able to show them the technologies of Internet of Things as it applies to baggage and checkpoint technologies, and how those things run on a very complex network, and how those devices will scan over 2 million passengers a day. And if we have an anomaly on the network, if we don't have the diversity of the paths, if we have some sort of recapitalization issue that's facing us and degrading that performance, we're affecting and providing an opportunity for a known suspected terrorist to be able to board aircraft.
Sure.
We're able to take them and talk through some of the high transactions that we do in the area of secure flight, so they understand the compute requirements that are necessary, and how that the analysts are necessary to be able to look at those panes of glass,
Right.
to be able to understand how we're buying down threat from a management perspective.
Yeah.
And then we started talking about, what are we not? And what we're not is we're not scaled to run large, complex networks with the federal staff that we have today. We're also not poised to be able to look at our current data center constructs and be able to move out to a different compute and storage model. So this is where it goes back to partnership, where we are able to sit down, since they've seen my mission. They know what my complexities are. I can sit down with the procurement staff at multiple levels and understand how we can transform how we deliver services today. I can sit down with the CFO community and I can start talking about recapitalization challenges and how these are unsustainable in the declining budget that we have today. So we can start discussing how do we transform ourselves, not that we no longer deliver services, but we govern services in a different way, we acquire services in a different way, and we actually transform the type of IT, the federal IT professional we're looking at, so that we're not looking for infrastructure professionals, we're looking for data analysts. We're looking for persons that understand how to operate in the cloud.
Excellent.
We're looking at the ability to move into a cloud or a DevOps approach. So it's that change in conversation I'm most proud of this year.
Yeah, I love the idea of the optics too, taking people out and showing them things. I think it was Einstein who said, if you can't visualize something, you can't understand it. And so having people visualize things drives things home. I think the era of text-based documents, by the way, is history too. And nobody likes to pick up and go through a bunch of text requirements and things like that. You need the graphics, you need the visualization to be included. How about a lesson learned?
I think the lesson learned is understand your technology, understand to talk at a different level based on your audience, and build that network. Great example that Adrian brought on is when the hurricanes were making landfall in Texas, is understand how that impacts, my services impact the FEMA mission, understand that there's transparency on how the services are being delivered, and when there's an anomaly, get in front of it early. But
Excellent.
those are my lessons learned.
Excellent points. Boy, we heard some great stuff with this panel. The progress in the CDM program moving along. Heard about Innovation Lab, the partnerships, and how FEMA made it through some real rough times, and still is with fires out in the West Coast. And we heard about the way you're reorganizing and doing what needs to be done. And I love that visualization idea. With that, I want to thank these senior panelists for taking time from your very busy schedules to be out here with us and share your thoughts with the audience and the listening audience out there in Radio Land. We're going to move over and hear from the DoD side of the house here in a short time, but first we're going to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik. We're doing our special profiles program out of the National Press Club. We've heard from the civilian panel. We've heard from the Department of Homeland Security panel, and now we're going to hear from our good friends over at Department of Defense. With me on this particular panel today are Tom Michelli, the Acting Deputy Chief Information Officer at the Department of Defense, and General B.J. Shwedo, the Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Air Force. We're talking about programs that have been successful, programs you're proud of, things that have happened. Let's start with Tom Michelli. Tom, talk, if I ask you to come up with a program that you've been working on this past year that you're really proud of, that you'd like to share with the audience and our listening audience, what comes to mind, Tom?
Well, I really can't take credit for it, but I'll take credit for the DoD CIO. We have a cyber scorecard. So about a year and a half ago, we had this thing called a cyber sprint, which turned into a cyber marathon, which turned into a cyber death march, and now it's kind of the new normal of life.
Okay.
And it goes right back to what I first learned in systems engineering software development. You got people, processes, and systems. And at the time, we really had nothing but people. We had some processes and some systems, and the task was to get it together to be able to report on how we were measuring ourselves against success against the cyber sprint things that we needed to do. DoD, if you can imagine, we spend about $40 billion a year on IT, and you have all the stuff that we've already put in. So we have millions, tens of millions of endpoints, tens of millions of users, and keeping track of how we're securing all the things those systems and all the things those people do on the DODN is a daunting task. So we started out pretty much just collecting data calls. In fact, our service components, and we have a fourth estate, which is not the press. The fourth estate is the defense agencies and activities, which is rather large. How they were doing against the tasks they were given. So we started with the people and the processes. We got data calls. We weekly updated a very manually intensive chart. And as we worked with the components and the agencies to realize how we get good understanding of how we were meeting those tasks with measures and metrics, we slowly began automating it.
Okay.
So we went from almost all data calls to adding simple data feeds. So to now we have about 12 different systems that are automatically updating the system. We're refining the metrics to make it more meaningful and relevant to how it adds lethality and efficiency to the department. And we're about ready to go into Cyber Scorecard 2.0. And this goes back into people and processes. We're working with a thing called Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, DIUX, you may have heard of that, and tapping into Silicon Valley on how we can make this more real-time, more feeds, more artificial intelligence, machine learning, to have a real risk assessment and cyber resiliency, so how we can fight our networks to bring lethality to our enemy, and to be best partners with our partners.
Wow. You know, we probably could talk cybersecurity for hours. We could talk about all the panels. In fact, we could probably do a radio show every month just on that subject, because it is such a challenge and it is such a high priority and high profile issue right now. What are some of the lessons you learned as you worked your way through these things in order that you'd pass on to your colleagues about perhaps to shortcut some of the things they need to do? So
this is back to the other two panels we've already talked about. So again, back to systems is working with service components, defense agencies to ensure that the systems will tie into a dashboard that is relevant, that is real time, that we work with our partners. So as an example, they call them the Friday beatings, right? So the service components would come in and we say, your scores aren't good enough, your scores aren't good enough. And we realized that we had to bring this up to the chiefs of staff, the senior leaders of the department, and say, hey, you're making mission trade-offs every day, and for good reasons. And we need to show you that you may be making a trade-off that's not being invested into the DODN or the systems of your service component, and you're putting it somewhere else instead. Maybe you need to make a different risk assessment and put some money back into the infrastructure of the SIXs and the CIOs of the different service components and agencies. When we were able to show that and work with the service component CIOs, the CFOs, and the leadership of the department, we got some pretty good traction. In fact, General Shwedo can probably tell you.
I'm the recipient of those meetings, yes.
but now the bidding shifted from the CIO to a service component who's on board with this,
Right.
and hopefully giving the service components the money and the resources they need to get things
What's
done.
some of the hardest things, the challenges, the hard things to get done in order to accomplish what you're trying to do, to get the result you're after?
Just the amount of things that that all the service components, so soldiers, sailors, coasties, Marines, airmen are doing to fight the fight, but also have to maintain our network. So the current fight, the future fight, technical debt. We again, all those risk trade-offs as we were fighting wars all around the globe, supporting, I heard FEMA and DHS and others with defense support civil agencies, all things that we were doing, we were making those risk trade-offs and building up technical debt. So we are reinvesting in that, marking down the technical debt. Ruthless configuration. One of the things the Cyber Scorecard showed us is, why are we going slow in certain places? And when we got together as a team, we said, if we were on one operating system platform, we could do so much goodness so much faster. So that made the decision to go to Windows 10, which required the partnership of the leadership of the department, both at the mission leaders to the financial leaders, to the CIOs, to make that happen.
Right, I do remember when Terry Halverson was on one of our radio shows and said, we're going to Windows 10.
Yeah, so some of the challenges are we had so many different systems, we had so much technical debt, we had processes and the different components that were different, and this really helped to coalesce, to align us, give us focus, and move forward.
Terrific. Let's talk a little bit with General Shwedo. BJ, what are some of the a program that comes to mind that you'd like to share with us that you think is really making a difference in over at Air Force?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, the programs, and well, especially in the Air Force, if you think about dogfighting, there's an old adage that says speed is life. And that is never truer than in cyber. The bottom line is speed is life in cyber. And we always talk about we need to operate at the speed of cyber. And we're literally in a spy versus spy game every day. The bad guys are wiggling windows, shaking doors to trying to get into our back door. And fundamentally, we have an older construct as background. Our infrastructure was laid down on several major commands. So every major command had a unique infrastructure. We have rolled all of those infrastructures up, but the bottom line is it is really, really hard to start doing something enterprise-wide. And if you are going to get at speed of light, and going back to a dogfight, there was a guy named Boyd, and he said he was the greatest fighter pilot that ever walked the earth, and I don't think I've ever met a fighter pilot that didn't tell me that.
That's right.
But
they probably shouldn't be fighter pilots.
Exactly
they don't
right.
think that way.
But he looked at the world in an OODA loop, and he said, so if you ever hear an Air Force person talk about OODA loops, he said he could break down the actions of that dogfight into observe, orient, decide, act. And whoever does that the fastest, whoever shrinks that OODA loop down the fastest, and then if you're really good, you start introducing errors into the other side's OODA loop and make theirs long and lethargic, and you'll always be inside their turning cycle when you go forward. So when we start talking about operating at the speed of cyber, we started looking at this 600,000 endpoint infrastructure that goes all over the world and said, how are we going to operate at the speed of cyber? And we challenged our folks, and they came up with a program called Automated Remediation and Asset Discovery, ARAD. We love acronyms in the military. And we said we need to start getting the back doors of the bad guys and get it incorporated. So going back to Boyd, you first need to know your infrastructure, which, you know, when you have a 600,000 endpoint worldwide, you'll find somebody take a laptop out of their 3-drawer, plug it in, and now your topography that you thought you had yesterday is not what you have today. So it's constantly moving. So we had to incorporate that, and one of the things this program does is rapidly find all of your endpoints, characterize it. Now let's start getting into that OODA loop that we need to remediate. So all of the scan patch remediation, if you look at how we in the previous life did this, it would be weeks before we could patch something. And fundamentally, if you're trying to get in that spy versus spy, get inside that OODA loop, you're never going to get there because it's weeks to do this. So part of that program is to also rapidly scan, patch, understand, and then remediate. And we have these things called command cyber readiness inspections. They come from U.S. Cyber Command, and everybody needs to be up to speed on that. It would be a long, lethargic process to find all the things that all the back doors they were looking for, et cetera, and to patch them individually. As soon as we got ARAD up and running, we rapidly found that it remediated and found things very quickly, and what used to take weeks, months, et cetera, is now rapidly being done through ARAD, which, okay, you can sit there and say, well, yeah, that's exercise or that's an inspection, but we rapidly came to the WannaCry situation. And while the world was kind of pouting over what happened, we went through that 600,000 endpoint. ARAD was able to patch all those endpoints, and for all the suspicious systems they had, they put it off on the side. It also gives us the capability to start doing holes and honeypots, et cetera, which now you start getting into the other portion of Boyd's OODA loop where you make theirs long and lethargic and start introducing errors in there. So fundamentally, it has been very, very successful. In the past, it would take us weeks, months, et cetera. And if somebody finds a back door, you can't let them have that. And you see a lot of the worldwide criminal elements. They'll look for a patch. They'll engineer it, figure out what it's patching, and then they figure they have a window of opportunity to exploit whatever that back door is. Having a capability where you can push enter and then all of a sudden having it all patched, that's when you start getting in the spy versus spy. Not only patching our doors, but then going after theirs. So if they attack us on this side, coming back, and quite honestly, we're seeing that across the Air Force. There's lots of bad guys that are putting back doors because fundamentally, do you really want to buy an airplane, first of all, then train them up to standards to go toe-to-toe with the Air Force, or do you want to
Right.
look as an asymmetrical attack? That's what we're finding. So what we have to do is find where they're exploiting
Right.
that back door and then close it.
Right. I can't wait to talk to my grandkids about OODA loops. That's going to be and I'll tell you what, when they get into the workforce too, you better be at the speed of cyber, because the way they work on those iPads now at very young ages are going to be an amazing challenge
It's
to keep.
funny you say that. So that's one of the bigger parts of my job, is to give our airmen a environment for them to do exactly what you're saying. And I'll tell you, I skip to work every day because our airmen are amazing. And a long, long time ago when I entered, they'd say, well, you do that because we've always done it that way. These guys shrug their shoulders and go, there should be an app for this.
That's right.
And then they create that app, and it waters your eyes. And then, you know, somebody's in your CIO office going, you can't allow this bad behavior to happen. No, 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 I want open architecture to hang that thing on. Now I need to make sure it's secure. But I am telling you, these guys are very, very fast at what they do. And I think that's another thing that I like about ARAD. The way things were being done in DOD a long time ago was you kind of had this big demarcation line between the people that were doing the war and the people that were providing the tools. That demarcation line's gone. I mean, the people that provide tools are in the foxhole with us every day. And the good news is I've got really neat airmen that can sit in the foxhole with the providers and go, no, we need to change happy to glad. And actually, they're fun to be around. I would hold on to my wallet the entire time you're talking to them, but they are very, very good at what they do. And they, in Boyd's OODA loop, they find faster, nastier ways to do business. Wow. And it's really, really fun to be around them.
Fantastic. Well, now, if I ask you about a lesson learned that you'd pass on as you work your way through this cyber speed and speed of cyber, is there something you'd pass on, a lesson learned that comes to mind that you think is worth mentioning?
Oh, absolutely. So first of all, it is teamwork. When you have that large a network worldwide, you need to make sure everybody's on board. And quite frankly, people don't like change. So the younger guys do. Sometimes the curmudgeons, and I find younger gets it, older, very senior people get it. It's the curmudgeons in between. They're usually the ones in my office saying, don't allow this bad behavior. Sometimes we got to kind of sideline those guys and
Right.
get those the people in there. What's wonderful for me is my leadership encourages the bad behavior. I mean, from secretary, chief, vice chief, all of them go, we need to foster this innovation piece. And it's very helpful for me when I'm trying to remove those curmudgeons.
Right.
To be able to do this. And then, you know, the last part is you start getting these apocalyptic predictions that if you do this, if you run this, the world is going to end.
Right.
And when you have senior leadership going, BJ, don't worry about it. You do it, and don't accept any phone calls. Send them to me. Yeah. That's a great, great environment to live and work in.
Yeah, you know, I think it was Robert Kennedy that said that 1/3 of everybody's against everything all the time, no matter what it is. And, you know, which makes the culture change issue, you know, such a difficult one to do over time. And, but let me try to do some sort of summarizing of our show here today. We had 3 separate panels. I think panel 1, the theme was consolidation, realignment, enterprise approaches. We heard about certifications and how DOJ has attained that certification. Then panel 2, we heard, of course, about the updates on the CDM progress and CDM panel. We heard about partnerships. That was the theme there, partnering, partnering, partnering. We heard it again from both of these gentlemen, the general and from Tom. We heard about the Innovation Lab and some of the things, and we talked about visualization and how important visualization is in order to get messaging across. And from this panel, we heard quite a bit about cyber sprint, cybersecurity, and the automating of cybersecurity, which I think is going to be a tremendous asset for the future. We heard about teamwork and the importance of teamwork to get things done. And just seeing the dynamics between DOD and Air Force, indicating that it requires those partnerships and teamwork.
This weekend is time we don't do teamwork together, and that's when Army beats Navy. But.
It's coming up. I can put you guys on the spot. Who wins that game? You're sort of like in neutral, right?
Yes, sir. Well, I every year hope Army and Navy are the best 11-1 teams in the country. So after they play Air Force.
Hey, Tom, who's going to win?
Army.
You know, I love both teams, but I do think Navy's been dominating quite a bit, so it would be nice to see Army pull one off. With that, let me try to first do some thank yous here. Start with thanking our panelists for taking time from their busy schedules to be here to share your ideas. Like OODA loop, which I hope is a word I can now plagiarize and use over and over again, because it just sounds kind of cool. And we need to thank our sponsors, without which we don't have a radio show. So thanks to the sponsors that help make this show happen month after month. Thanks to the great people at Federal News Radio, who are a lot of fun to work with and always do an efficient job and make it easy for us to do the show. Thanks to National Press Club for hosting us here today. We had enjoyed it, the opportunity to be in a different environment. Thanks to Tom Trezza and Trezza Media Group, who I've been partnered with for now 12 years, and just having a real blast doing this program. And most importantly, thanks to our listening audience that for the last 12 years have been tuning in and listening to our show. With that, I want to thank everybody. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.